One retreat I went to is just hiking in the mountains. And then we had to ask each other a question and then listen. So the question was like, what is important in your life? And the other person would listen and listen and listen, not do anything. And it's like, oh, okay, this is important. And then, that guy talks. And then the next assignment was, okay, so now what's really important in your life? And that's when something cracks open and you connect to something deeper. And it's like, yeah, shit. All the things I think are important, they're actually not that important. Something underneath is much more important than that.
Welcome to the Rise and Play podcast. I am Sophie Vaux, your host and leadership coach. In the show, my wonderful co-host and I sit down with influential and diverse leaders from the gaming industry to hear about their leadership journey. Not the well-polished stories, but the real stories. The up and down, the breakthrough, and the failures. Or should we rather say learnings? Each episode will transport you into a magical space of vulnerability with our guest. And together, you'll be reminded that no matter how hard it is, you are not alone in this journey and find the courage to keep going. Come and join the ride. Let's begin. And one last thing, I am working on new ideas to scale our impact on leadership health and consciousness in games. Would you like to be part of the change too? Then let's connect. Now, let's get to the episode. So hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Rise and Play. And today we have a special topic, which is about leadership retreats for leaders. And since it is not even a topic, and usually this is something we share in private conversation, we've been to retreat, but the effect is so big on us, we thought, why not make an episode about it to give a bit more visibility and light on what is a retreat, what happens, why is it even a thing, and maybe why shouldn't we have even more of it applied in the gaming industry. So today I have with me co-host and also guest. So I'll start maybe from the left with Dirk, former CEO and co-founder at Paladin Studio. I'll let you start after on where you are today because I don't know in detail. And Tiffany, also former co-host on the Rise and Play podcast and product leader at multiple companies, gaming companies. I'll let you also introduce yourself. Tiffany, if you'd like to give a quick reminder where you are today.
Yeah, great to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany. I think you've heard from me before. I've spent the past decade in gaming at some of the biggest publishers and also doing some investing and startup advising. Today, I'm working more on gaming AI, and we all know that AI people love going on retreats. So excited to talk about that in this little slice of Silicon Valley culture today.
Nice. Dirk?
Yeah. So right now, my life is basically a sabbatical. I closed down the studio recently and it's on hold. So I guess it's a big retreat for me. And soon I'll be back doing something, but that is still an uncertain mystery. So we'll see where that goes.
And speaking of retreat, as you know, it's a closure of such a big chapter, of a company. It is, a big relationship of your life, and it takes some time to recover and grieve. And so for the context, we were also together at a retreat in Berlin. Not that it was planned, the timing, but at the perfect timing. And we will touch on that as well. So for the context, for the listeners, I wrote an article about it where I did share an experience I had end of last year. I went to a medicinal retreat in Colombia, and this is something I wanted to do for a while. And it was a perfect time when I was in transition of life, a career, a good timing and calling. And then a lot came out for me through the retreat to even have more clarity, what I've done in the past, where I was today, and having the courage to just take a leap in what I believe and what I truly wanted to do, which I'm doing today. And that's when I thought, why not make it like a topic? Because there's definitely a big transformation in some of those retreats. And so I wanted to start maybe the first part of the conversation on, why are we here? Like the question, why are we here talking about retreat? And maybe for context, let's start with you, Tiffany. What part it has played in your life that you'd like to share today about retreats?
Yeah, of course. Retreats have been really interesting for me. I think I did my first one in Peru in the rainforest in 2018. And that actually was right before I decided to move to London and leave America for the first time. So it was a really big part in my life that helped me kind of step back and investigate my past more because I felt like I often didn't make time for it. So now it's often a place where before I have a major change, I can go, I can kind of review things that were maybe more part of my formative years and how those are still impacting my actions today. Some of those retreats have actually been more practice based in meditation. Like recently, I just finished a Mahamudra retreat that was 6 days long and 8 hours a day. And that's one that I'm still taking daily to just practice having that headspace for myself. So I've been trying to bring the retreats more and more into my day to day life, but I think they also hold a special place as a break to review and take stock of what do you still want to remain in your life that you're already doing right now, not just new things that you want to start doing.
Mm. It's like creating, getting to the core of your life, like trimming some layers. Derek, also, yeah, your story is interesting. You mentioned also in your previous episode a bit, about it, but yeah, how a retreat have played in your life and as your leadership journey.
Yeah, for me, retreats have been a game changer. I've been an entrepreneur for 2 decades, and basically, you get stuck in this tunnel vision of okay, go go go, build cool stuff and make things happen. And there's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes you just need to take a step back and look at what you're doing. And I started using business trips for that purpose a little bit. In hindsight, I can see that, where I just went out of the normal daily routine. It's a little bit of a step back. You can connect to the industry. You can see what's going on, and then maybe also take 1 or 2 days extra to recharge. I learned to start doing that. it's the biggest tip I have. Like, okay, after a show or before a show, just take 2 days in a cabin in the woods somewhere and just relax with some friends and talk about life, basically. And then you come back with new ideas and insights. And that's, for me, how it got started a little bit. And retreats are similar, but then more on a personal, spiritual level. So I would say that's how I got into that. And my practice today it's a combination of different spiritual practices like meditation, yoga. I sing, so I do kirtan. It's like mantra singing and stuff like that. It's all really woo woo. So yeah, good stuff.
Let's go back to the definition here of retreat, right? Because we talk about retreat, but we don't talk about the same thing. And retreat, in a core definition, it's when you are going away from your routine, your daily programming, in a way, to isolate. So there are many ways of isolating yourself, like for a few days, going geographically very far in a very different environment with different people to get perspectives. And it has different level of intensity based on how far you go from your normal operating mode. And that's why we have here a different example of a type of retreats, but to also be broad on the term, you have like super long retreat where you have to travel and medicinal, spiritual, or with practice. And it could also be going, in nature for the weekend and not disconnecting, not looking at your phone, your work, etc., and just reconnecting with your close ones, family and relatives. I just mentioned, like when you go on a weekend, they are nice to recharge. But when you are going through a big pivotal moment of your life where several things has gone wrong, like you're maybe in the wrong job, maybe you're in the wrong relationship, with the wrong identity, so many layers, then you need some a bigger shift, isolation, to really get distance and perspective. So I'm curious, what was the trigger for you where you'd say, okay, I'm going to try this kind of more intense retreat? Like conditions are hard, right? Some are really physical, some are emotional. And that gave you the safety, confidence that I would try that. Put myself in a very difficult situation where I'll be fine. I'll grow from this.
There's no specific circle, but it was just a calling, right? It's not really a like, oh, this happened, now I need to do a retreat, like I need to wash my car or something, you know. It's nothing like that. But at some point you feel something where it's not aligned somehow, and what it is, I don't know, it doesn't matter, but something's off in your life or in the way you are, you know, your state of mind. And at that point, that's usually when you are a little bit more open to making a big change. And I think that's when you get that calling, or when I get that calling. I'm also an intensely curious person. So I just want to, that spiritual path is, I take that pretty seriously. It's not something for everybody, but for me, it is something that is really, yeah, I just can't help myself. You know, I'm just curious about, you know, all this mystical stuff, and, you know, what is consciousness and all that jazz. So, you know, and then the best way to learn about that is to take a deep dive and spend some time, a couple of days, with, you know, whatever master you can find, or whatever discipline or tradition you can find, and explore that, and then take that home, take the insights home, and then integrate it, and then, you know, the cycle begins again, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think similarly, apart from that first time when I was moving, since then, I was able to recognize more subtle indicators that maybe I needed to take a break and recharge, but also in a way that was much more reflective than my typical recharge time is. And I kind of think of retreats and the practices that you learn in them, or the medicine that assists it, are really different ways of talking to yourself and having new perspectives of looking at yourself, your life, and your actions and your motivations. Where there are several times at retreats, I think I realized that I had been hiding things from myself, or that there were characteristics or qualities I thought I had that were innate to myself. And one of them was that I love seeing the truth in things. I love finding the truth in things. But in ways, this left me blind to when I might be lying to myself about something. And there were things that I think were formative in my past to who I am today, that I wanted to be able to see them in a different light, because I had already been working with therapy and felt like I had gotten the very like Western like cognitive behavioral view of it that was very logical. But I actually don't think logic drives a lot of the ways that we form our personality, or that we even make decisions. So I wanted ways to look at it that were not so rooted in logic and more in this holistic sense of self. And I felt like in order to do that, I really needed help from a teacher, or from other types of things or rituals that they might do at the retreat. And I had such a profound experience at the first one that was also profoundly difficult, that I left kind of knowing I want to try this again when I feel ready, and also not right away. So I think it was a few years until my next one. And now I figured out how to do them in ways that feel smaller and a bit more sustainable. And it gets easier each time to kind of look at myself in this new way. So it's also a bit like a muscle that I've been developing. And now that it's been like 6 times, I can kind of bring that forward out into my life over the course of a weekend without as much assistance as I used to need in the past.
Wow, it sounds like an amazing journey since you started. And reflecting on what you shared, it's really having the courage to look inside, because, yeah, there's a lot of things we know about ourselves, but somewhere we know that we're lying to ourselves. And when you go in some of those retreats where you're exactly, I even think of silent retreat. I haven't tried that yet. I'm curious. Like, I relate to you, Dirk. Like, my curiosity is drawing me, but the fear as well. Like, how will I behave after 10 days not talking? But when you have nothing but confronting with yourself, you can't escape. And this is where you grow, you heal as well. And there are just different ways to access that. But it starts from a motivation of a personal growth, learning about yourself, peeling the layers of the onion, as we say. Indeed, the Western focus on the healing, which is very head-based, cognitive-based, what's happening with the body trauma, generational trauma. And it's like not woo-woo, actually. In that case, it's actually measured. There's a science.
It's called somatic stress.
Yes. Yeah. And all those symptoms are, appearing because of like latent stress, and we just can measure it later physically. But then when I realized, okay, there are things that I'm feeling, but are maybe not from this time, like this life, but a past generation, and you carry this is through the birth, the genes. Like, how do I heal? And this is when I started also to be a little curious about other ways to get there in a more effective way. Maybe here in the case of some retreat we've been together, Derek, if you're open to discuss it, I like also to share also a bit more the process of what the retreat we've been together few times, and together and not together, with the one medicinal retreat with Ambi in Colombia, and then also in Berlin. And maybe if you could describe, I know it, the process of, the before the retreat, during the retreat, what comes out, and after the retreat, for people who have no idea of what is a medicinal retreat.
Mm-hmm. So these things are really difficult to talk about without it sounding completely batshit crazy, right? I think what I want to highlight is that the main component of all of this is that it's a spiritual journey. And this is also what the organizers emphasize, right? It has a spiritual component. You go in and you connect to that spirit world in whatever shape or form it is, whatever the method is, right? And there's multiple modalities in any retreat. The way I see it is I go in and I have an intention or two, and then whatever happens during these ceremonies or during the retreat in general, that's just, whatever was supposed to happen. So maybe my intention was like, I'm stuck with what is the mission and vision for my company. I've been struggling with that for years. I accomplished the goals that I set. Now what? That's a big one. And you go in, and then it turns out pretty fast, actually, that it's not at all about that. It's more about how's the relationship with your partner, how's the relationship with your kids, how do you treat yourself? Do you eat healthy? Do you take enough rest? Are you kind to yourself and to your friends and your peers and your coworkers and all of that hard stuff, basically? Like, how do I manage my finances, or how do I get to X million euros revenue or whatever? That's completely irrelevant. And maybe it will give you some answers, or maybe there's something, but you will see, like one retreat I went to, we just went hiking in the mountains, and we were paired up with another person. And this was not a medicinal retreat. It was just paired up with another person. And then we had to ask each other a question and then listen. So the question was like, what is important in your life? And then we would walk for 5 or 10 minutes, and and the other person would listen and listen and listen, not do anything, no acknowledgements or tips or whatever, just listen. And then you hear yourself talking, and you're walking in this beautiful mountain range, and it's like, oh, okay, this is important. But then, you switch, and then that guy talks, and then actually the next assignment was, okay, so now what's really important in your life? And that's when something cracks open and you connect to something deeper, and it's like, yeah, shit. All the things I think are important, they're actually not that important. Something underneath is much more important than that. And that's, for example, the relationship. It's all about relationships in the end, as far as I can tell. Maybe there's more, but relationship to yourself, to your heart, to the great spirit, God, or whatever you want to call it, to your family, your friends, everything. And then that these things come out, and then you see your own patterns, and then you can actually become more conscious of the way you behave in everyday life. You take that back, and you have a shot at improving the situation that you're in. Now, if that's not valuable, I don't know what is. So whether it's plant medicine or meditation or like sort of like co-created coaching sessions or hiking, or one of the most profound retreats I did was sitting for 48 hours on the same spot out in nature by myself and you just think and you just process all kinds of stuff. I went through every encounter in my whole life. It's like, oh, I did that wrong. Oh, shit, forgive me, please. I'm sorry. All these things. And that's pretty powerful stuff. And it doesn't matter, like really, it doesn't matter what the modality is. Just being present with what is there at that moment, I think, is really the ultimate benefit that you can get from going on these extended introspective breaks.
Mm.
Yeah, I felt like all of the ones that I've been on have had very different setups, and they were all lovely in their own way. I would just suggest people try a variety of different things and then see what works for them. For some people, like you were saying, a Vipassana, which is often a 10-day silent meditation retreat, that can take a ton of different forms, from where the Goenka style, they might wake you up at 4 a.m. to start meditating for 10 hours a day so that by the end of it, you've done 100 hours. And other ones, the one that I did in April was with the Hridaya Institute on like beautiful beach in Mexico. And they're very kind by waking you up at 7 a.m. for meditation. But some of the meditation also involves hatha yoga, so you're not sitting as much. But for many people, that aspect of not speaking for 10 days is very daunting. And it's not even not just speaking, it's that as you're trying to walk past someone to get your food, if you lock eyes, you're supposed to look back down and not purposely brush shoulders with them, or even like look at them. And it's called interiorization, where you're trying to be in your own experience. And it can feel a bit alien because you're all sitting together, 50 people eating lunch, and everyone has like shawls around them and eye masks on their face and earplugs in. It felt very otherworldly, but I actually found the silence to be much easier than I had anticipated, because many people feel like that's such like an essential part of the human experience. But I felt like it was actually quite helpful, because I realized that when we talk to each other, we're actually continually generating content in our lives. And then when you're trying to meditate, especially if you're not an experienced meditator, and so thought distractions can become very prevalent, you constantly have new content to go over and analyze. And it showed me how much I microanalyze everything in the back of my head. And it took me 3 or 4 days of not doing anything in my life, not talking to anyone, not looking at anyone, before I ran out of recent content to overanalyze. And then there was a lot more peacefulness. But I've done other meditation retreats for about the same length of time, where you're actively getting an instruction, you're trying it, and then you're conversing with the other students on how they did, how you did. And so in some ways, I think without the silence, you might learn faster in the technique, but you're not getting the same opportunity for reflection and kind of reviewing like, what place does speech and socialization actually have in then getting you to perform certain behaviors, and how much are we implicitly looking to follow social norms in our life, even if we might think that we are bucking the trend. Or in my first retreat in Peru, I also realized that came into my own self-talk. I was very willing to look inside, but I'd hit a wall in like getting myself to reveal more about why I was doing certain things. And I had thought that I was speaking politely to myself and asking myself, like, oh, why do I feel this way about this or that? And during the retreat with the medicine, I realized I was actually shouting at myself internally the entire time and saying, like, show me this. Why
Yeah.
do I do this? I would rather do this. But I wasn't actually willing to talk to myself with the kindness that I talk to other people who I love. So why can't I speak to myself that way? Why don't I have that positive curiosity about why I do things the same way that I would a close friend? I'm so judgmental to myself more than others. And that was a breakthrough that I think I couldn't have gotten without the medicine component of that retreat. But I was able to access it and use it later in other retreats that might have just involved practice or silence or conversing with others.
Yeah, and those examples, it's amazing. Again, you're drawing my curiosity from just the examples, the very different experiences. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's tools to access, and you have different ways, methods that are maybe you're more sensitive to, responsive to. But something that I love the analogy of the content generation. what I'm reflecting often as well is we live in a world where we are overwhelmed by information, and right. So it's an effort to not be distracted. But if you even are passive, you are like fed with a lot of things that are not your thoughts, not your wants. It's much more effort. So how do you access that? And those are some ways to learn the path. But once you learn the path, you can keep practicing in maybe in a more integrated way. And that's also a part I wanted to mention. Derek is like after some of those retreats, the integration part, which can use this as your toolbox. And that's why when we talk about those retreats, they're recreational retreats, and it's really not what we're talking about, which is actually doing the inner work, and it's difficult. And that's why also it's not shared, because it's sometimes mistaken for a recreational retreat. But all of that is a lot of work before, during, and after. But then, the reward is on you and the people who are around you as you are closer to your true self. And question I wanted to ask then, because we talk about quite some of experience that are not the most accessible, right? You have to find where to trust the place, to go, the different teachers, the different methods. For the listeners here who are not even like close to that world, what are the practice that you do today that you could say are accessible to others to get close to that in some way, or some retreats if you have, or even not recommendation? Because also I want to give as a disclaimer here, we're talking about our own experience, but we are in no way practitioners or doctors. So we're really sharing our experience and to give perspectives. So I will ask as well here, where from your experience, it was not the right time also for you to go.
So the first thing is just stop overloading your brain with, your phone and always on 24/7 pings on Slack, news feeds, all the yada, 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 yada that you're basically putting in your brain. It's really powerful to just take a break every now and then. Even if it's just the evenings or the weekends or both, just go offline and just do nothing for a bit, right? Even if it's just a couple of minutes. That would be, I think, the first real gateway that might open some of this up, because you'll be there with yourself and just, you'll have time to kill, and you'll start processing some of these things that you've been ingesting in a way. And then there are sort of workshops that are short and sweet, that you could go for an hour to a yoga class and get a taste of it. You could do a meditation class. There's online meditation classes. There's breath work, which is a really great way to sort of, especially the somatic stress, just to, go deeper into yourself, release some of the stress that's built up in the body. I would say even just running or exercise in general, I think would be a really good way to do that. And then, taking that up a notch, one of the things that I like to do a lot is called ecstatic dancing. And this is like barefoot dancing. It's fantastic. It's great. Just free form barefoot dancing, no substances, no alcohol, no nothing. And you just, you move in the way you want to move. Like the instruction is like dance, like you have the curtains drawn and it's your favorite music, and just go, nobody's watching. And that's really liberating, because your body has been sitting still for a long time. If you're anything like me, you're sitting a lot, and then just moving in the way that the body wants is really, really liberating and powerful. Sort of, get rid of the stiffness that's building up. And then, go to a therapist, go to, all these things. And they say, and these are the things to get started and learn, do a spiritual practice, whatever it is. You can go to a mantra singing circle, right? If there's nothing wrong with, there's nothing scary about it, right? It feels good. It's nice. It's good people. You just sing, and that's it. And then you go home and you feel lighter. Well, it's great. So all these things are really nice. Or, I like to play guitar at home. Just play guitar and do some singing at home. Just have fun, I guess. That would be my take, but I'm sure there's more.
Yeah, ecstatic dance is actually very popular here in the Bay Area. There's a popular organizer called Daybreaker, where people actually go to them very early in the morning and have like green juices and then go to their office job directly after, and it ends at 9 a.m. I feel like dance is a generous term. It's really like,
Yeah.
bootleg. It's like when you're trying to show in the video of the, moving how your body wants to move. So it's really not about being a good dancer at all. I think those are great. However, I'm not a morning person, and apparently people mainly want to do this kind of thing in the morning. But I think having, movement in your life is just really shown in like study after study to reduce background stress. And having a regular yoga practice was really important to me. And I read The Body Keeps the Score, which I really recommend to anyone who wants to figure out ways of getting to know themselves and be less reactive to their environment that doesn't just involve talk-based therapy or things that are very like logical or rational. And they found that people who had depression or PTSD, when they did therapy, they were twice as likely to actually finish their therapy regimen that they were doing in the trial if they paired it with a yoga practice at the same time. Because often talking about things and doing this insight work is really hard, and you need to have a way to let it move out of the body. And
Yeah.
that's not just for people with clinical problems. While that study was done on people who have clinical depression and were seeing a therapist, it did really indicate that we have somatic stress. We store stress in parts of our body, and moving your body helps move that stress out. Whether it's just a manageable amount of stress, it can make it easier. I think today I meditate between 30 minutes to an hour a day. I try to break that up into morning and night. I have an insights based practice right now with Mahamudra where I'm really trying to work with emotions and processing them in a less logic based way, but more sitting with them and imagining people in my life reflecting those emotions back to me, because humans love projecting. But there's also like practices around building awareness and non duality that I'm only really just beginning to learn and discover. And
Yeah.
I think on the meditation piece, I've had a practice here and there for the past 6 years, but I really struggled to hold it. And I kind of want to counter this idea that retreats might not be accessible to many people, because I actually really believe that they are. It just depends what is the right first step for you that feels accessible. But they happen everywhere. You don't have to fly somewhere to go to them. You don't need to do what might feel like an extreme medicine retreat. Any retreat that gives you a break from your life, that might only just be over the weekend with someone who's a practitioner of a skill that you think could actually really serve you, and you want to learn the right way to do it. I find like it's a very important inflection point, because many people try to learn things like meditation and they're like, well, I sit there for an hour and I listen to Headspace and maybe I feel more relaxed, but often I feel really defeated because I'm just thinking of things constantly. The same way that you would learn any other skill in your life, I really believe that you need a teacher that can be a teacher intermittently, where then you can then take those learnings and work on them in your own time. But the retreats provided me with an inflection point where I needed to hit this wall that was difficult and have help to get past it. And then it was like this unlock where I could keep moving past it, and sometimes backwards and forwards afterwards, but I could then make more gradual improvements. So I think self practice is great for gradual and linear. And then I was able to kind of make like a leap every time I did a retreat, which is why I try to do them every 6 to 12 months. But they really happen everywhere. The last one that I just did for 6 days, the Mahamudra meditation retreat, was entirely online and with some really good practitioners. So I just recommend doing your research and following your own internal curiosity. And if you feel like the first one doesn't speak to you, don't be afraid to try another. And many of them have a lot of different financial aid opportunities available as well.
Well, that was a broad scope of a lot of options. Thanks a lot. That's amazing to hear.
Forgot a couple. Journaling,
Yes.
ice baths,
Mm-hmm.
or cold showers, or both.
Oh, yeah.
Those are really powerful too.
Sauna.
Sauna, yeah, all these things. So it's like, oh man, there's so much available. Stop drinking alcohol. Please stop drinking alcohol. That would be like the number one. If you're drinking alcohol every day or every week, it's a really good idea to just quit it. And all these little things, they stack up, right? It adds up to a more wholesome life. Anyway, that was my
Yeah.
preaching thing. So thank you.
Thanks. So we have here quite a lot of accessible options to get started, to just be more connected to the self, right? Because again, the default state is to be disconnected. I mean, that's unfortunately the world where we are bombarded with a lot of input. And back to the tip on the alcohol, I wanted to share a funny anecdote where I'm French, and for most of my life, I've been drinking. I mean, it's part of my lifestyle until I had to prepare the diet for the first retreat. I had to stop for a month, and my body started to have reaction, like allergic reaction all over my body. Like my mom saw me and she thought I was sick. And I was like, what's going on? And that's where I realized I'm fully detoxing, and I had no idea. And since then, it made me realize, like, physically that was in my body for so long. And it has, of course, changed how I'm approaching what I, even ingest in my body, because you are what you eat and what you drink. And until you realize that, so I didn't stop drinking completely, because I do like a glass of wine once in a while, but
Sure.
it's like once in a while. It's not like one every few days, like before, where it was just a habit. So, and the way I'm feeling is very different as well. So I can definitely say that it's being mindful about what we consume, whether it's in our body or even like content, media, information, the people we have in our life. Everything is shaping the way we are and we feel.
Yeah.
I think an alternate perspective on that, though, is that being French, you're allergic to not drinking wine.
Yeah.
Suddenly your body breaks out knives.
It's in your ancestry, right? Your
When
genes.
Dirk said that, I was like, oh no, all the Europeans were just like, what? No alcohol? Not even beer or wine?
Yes. Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. I mean, like I'm being shamed when I refuse. I refuse to drink.
It's
So it
not
depends.
easy.
There's a term for this in California. It's actually called being California sober, which
Ah,
means no alcohol, but yes to psychedelics and cannabis.
yeah. Okay.
It's become a funny stereotype of when someone in California says that they're sober. They're like, okay, but what does that mean to you?
Yeah. As we're getting at the end, at least for the episode today, I'm sure we have more follow-up, because there's a lot to cover, but also curious to hear what the listeners will have as questions, or how it will open conversation. I'll ask the last question more as like from a critical point of view, where it's not accessible, as we said, like the retreats or taking some time for ourselves. And here in the gaming industry, so refocusing on our industry, it's quite a creative industry, but it also, like, I feel like sometimes, like now I'm taking a break out of games, like full in games. I feel like out of a bit of an addiction, like like a hangover. That's how I felt when I was not like constantly checking the news and what's working and what games features and so on. And when I describe that in the way retreat, take time for yourself, take a break, these are so opposite ideas that I would like to hear your thoughts of why makes it difficult to sell the idea of taking time for yourself, retreat, or all the things we discussed to just reconnect with yourself. What are the blockers you see today in the gaming industry?
Sure, yeah. Just the way that we have vacation days in our companies, and especially in America, where often you're getting a bit less, or it can be stigmatized to actually take the amount of vacation that you want in these, unlimited vacation tech companies. That is the trend. Is that like going on a Vipassana where it's 10 days and you're going to travel a day on either side? And also, the last thing that you want to do after being silent for 10 days is to wake up the next day, go to a busy airport, and then go back to your job the following day. You want that integration period. It's just really challenging. I've often saved something like that for when I'm actually just on a break between things. And I think that can be something that often doesn't feel accessible to some people who don't feel like they can take 2 weeks in between their next gig. Or, there's many people in the gaming industry right now who are finding themselves laid off, where I think actually with Vipassanas, many of them are entirely donation based. So there are ways to kind of make this workable if you're thinking of it as a vacation within your budget or within your time. But I would like to expand that definition of a retreat for that reason to also include those that are online, that you can do ones that are almost entirely in the morning or in the evening, or also ones that are over a long weekend. I've done several 3-day retreats that I found incredibly impactful as long as you schedule the integration afterwards. So I think a lot of it is really time-based. And then, of course, there's a stigma around medicinal retreats, which are actually like entirely legal in a lot of their home countries and where these rituals might be performed. I think like really the insights are the insights, and it shouldn't matter what type of retreat that they came from. So I would love to see it more normalized for people to talk about how they went on, vacations at work that weren't really vacations at all, but really periods of self-work that they still wanted to prioritize taking time off for. And, the details of how you actually work towards those insights gets kind of close to describing your therapy routine in the office, which many people don't do anyway. So I think like what you take away from it, that can be the meat of it. And that will often jog people's curiosity. And they can then find a way that they think they can get to those similar insights that works for them. And they might be open to a more limited type of retreat than what you went through. But often the practices are done without it, without any medicine, that you can do the same type of practice or ritual and get benefit out of it. And there's actually a really interesting study that was done by a university in the Netherlands and in Frankfurt on the efficacy of medicine retreats in Peru on depression and empathy. And it was placebo controlled. There was a low sample for each one because they're doing retreat. They can only cater to so many people, but they did it over the course of like 10 retreats. So it was a pretty good sample size for seeing if there's any actual measurable effect against the placebo. And they found that across the board, doing the retreat was helpful to increase people's empathy almost by like 2 times and to reduce their depression and rate of like reporting depressive feelings. And this effect increased the longer the days after the retreat. And it was actually very like less important whether you did the medicine ritual in the retreat. So the placebo and the treatment group both reported similar effects. The treatment group reported larger. However, with the sample size, it was clear the most important thing was going on the retreat itself. And like if there's one thing that people could take away from this, it's that, hey, like talking about plant medicine, talking about taking an oath of silence for 10 days, all these things that sound extreme. The most important thing is just that you go out and try something that you feel works for you. And that can get you started on a path that might have been really obscured to you before. And you never really know what it's going to be that shows you a new way to engage with yourself in integrity.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful world out there, man. And there's so much to explore.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of stigma, I guess, around some of these things, but I'm pretty open about it. And, I haven't encountered any like in one ear and out the other ear, right? People completely filter this out and they just continue on their way, or they're super interested in it and they want to learn more. And whether this is about plant medicine or about yoga or, mantra singing, these are all topics that are sort of like in the realm of like, oh, there's this guy, is one of those weird folks, licking frogs in the Amazon or something, which, by the way, I don't do that. But, it's like that's sort of the stigma
Not yet.
you might get. Yeah, not yet, maybe one day. But it doesn't really change the relationship, and sure, maybe you're a bit of an oddball in some people's eyes, but then again, that's not necessarily a bad thing in my book, at least. So, yeah, if it's calling you, it's calling you. And then, yeah, just, take a look around and take a look inside and figure out what the next step would be that's sort of on the edge of your comfort zone, but not over it and also not too comfortable, right? I think that's probably where you want to be.
Well, we'll wrap up on those. Wanted to also add to this point, because this is a topic I've been reflecting a lot after going through a retreat, which I would say it's a journey of self-awareness and consciousness, right? The more you know, the more you open, the more you understand about yourself, humanity, how how we all work and are connected, what's really important, really, really important. And there are very few things that are really, really important at the end as we're going through this journey. And what I found some blockers is, of course, how much the level of self-awareness, because again, the default state is you are a script, you are on a script, and it's a script that you've picked from the many different sources. There's the stigma, right? So, oh, you are that person that is doing that thing. But all of that is a judgment where today we just talked about, it's opening up yourself, like understanding really what's inside. Why is that script still running? It's like when you start to really to question, it's uncomfortable. And this is the internal battle when you start to question your identity. That's, I think, one of the hardest psychological blockers, because I think especially in roles of leadership, it's almost like you are incentivized to be that person. Like you are that whatever identity you forge. And when you have to question that, this is very uncomfortable, because you ask yourself, should I be in this position? Should I deserve this responsibility? Etc., etc. So there's a lot at stake. But in a way, in a counterintuitive way, that's what needed. When you are taking responsibility, you have to look inside, because it will have a cost, quite a deep cost, inside and outside, when you're responsible for teams, companies. And on a positive note, looking forward, this is something I've been starting as a work, being connected to retreats, different practitioners around the work of self-growth, leadership, and connecting around this work that is more inner healing, to become the leader in whatever you do, that is truly, what you're meant to do, and not because somebody asks you to be that person, and so on and so on, where we see also the damage on a more collective level. So just wanted to leave it here, that I will be more visible in the future in organizing a leadership retreats that will touch a bit on that kind of work. Maybe not like the extreme version, but some bits that we talked about today, just to do it in a more accessible way. So I really believe that in workplace where they understand that, for the ones who are in charge, it's possible to make it happen if we really understand the value it is at the individual level and collective level. So a spark of hope, in the future around the retreat, at least the whole topic. Anything at last that you wanted to share before we close?
I'd love to get on your mailing list for your leadership retreats.
Yes, I will be visible about that. I'm already working on it, like pilot project. So for the ones interested, yes, it's going to be something new. It's not going to be something like what we have with those options. It's a co-creation, right? So it's evolving in the field as us. So something specific for gaming, maybe with some of us here integrated, and taking the elements of it where we can learn more about ourselves in a safe way and accessible way.
Yeah, and I want to make one sort of note that, yes, it's scary to open the lid and look inside and see what's going on in the dark in your, in those parts of you that you've not been conscious of before. But for me, it's even scarier to not know what's going on in the dark, in those subconscious realms, because they do steer your life. They direct your life in a big way. And if you don't know that, then you're going to be stuck. And if you do know it and you're conscious of it, that's where the opportunity comes, or the possibility comes, that you can make a change for the better. So
you can always go home and pretend nothing happened afterwards.
Yes. Yeah.
No one's telling you that you have to change your life after this retreat.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. Just have to live with yourself. However, you can't live yourself. So that's the only thing. When you can't not know.
I would suggest, though, that going to the retreat with the purpose of trying to get in a new headspace so you can brainstorm more business ideas for your startup, or a direct answer to your marriage, or any other like very specific and targeted question that you think like, oh, I just need to like unlock it from my subconscious. You're going to be hard pressed to find that. But if that's what you would like to use retreats for, you will probably actually find something much more valuable to you out of the experience.
Yeah, it's like the gateway into a realm that you'll be surprised what comes out of it.
Yeah, I would say it's like, as an analogy, it's the clickbait. It's the clickbait of
It's
your
the clickbait, yeah.
of your healing journey.
Yeah.
But that works. I mean, if you gets you in, and then this is where you discover other things. Thank you very much for this. It was amazing. I learned so much through this conversation. It's just the beginning of it. I'm sure we have more. And stay tuned for future ideas and events around retreats in gaming.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have a few more episodes on mindfulness, meditation, and self-work just in general on the podcast that I'm really excited for. So this is just the beginning, hooking you in with the medicine retreats. And then you'll stay for everything else.
Well, thank you, and have a great rest of the day, and we'll tune in soon again on those topics.
Thanks.
Thanks. See you later.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Rise and Play podcast. We keep growing our community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. If you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders, because we have so much more we can learn from each other. And if you want to accelerate your growth, I offer creative leadership coaching and workshop, plus other free resources that you can find on riseandplay.io. I can't wait to connect with you. Have a great week, and remember to take care of yourself. Until the next time,